Professor Rafael is going to be introduced by Ms. Maricor John, Director of the University Press.
Thank you. I'm glad I don't have to answer the barrage of questions, but only to introduce the one who will. 2 weeks ago, there was a conference on book publishing in Southeast Asia, at which the director of the National University of Singapore Press, Dr. Paul Kratowska, a historian turned publisher, was speaker. Over dinner one evening, Paul, we accidentally found out, had taught at the Ateneo in the mid-70s. The stories he shared with his students in the Ateneo were so funny and some bordered on the embarrassing that we had to ask if we had at least some good students. Oh, he said, I did have a star student and I knew he would go far. Well, that star student went very far indeed. The year he graduated at the Ateneo was the first year that co-eds were admitted. Perhaps for that reason, he was voted among the top 10 sexiest students of that year and was reportedly the only non-athlete on the list. Fortunately for all of us, he didn't just stop being a campus idol. He went on to become a serious graduate student, receiving his MA and PhD from Cornell. He has taught and mentored in several universities since then, and has published pioneering and provocative books with such important presses as Duke, Cornell, Anvil, and the Ateneo Press. More important, he has persistently contributed to a healthy and lively intellectual atmosphere, both here and abroad, through his writings, talks, book reviews, and constant and consistent support of publishing projects and works of other scholars, both local and foreign. We are happy that he is with us today, proving the fulfillment of a promise that was foreseen 30 years ago. Please welcome star student and now mature author, teacher, and intellectual, Vicente Rafael.
I told you not to tell that story. Oh, anyway, maraming salamat. Good afternoon to everybody. It's always a pleasure to come here and have a chance to revisit my old haunts and see old friends and reconnect with other people as well as meet new students. Every time I look at the Ateneo students, every year I come here, they always seem to be getting younger and younger, which of course means I'm getting older and older. So, let's see. First of all, thank you again for coming, despite the fact that the air of decision came today, and I thought maybe no one was going to come. But it's a good thing people came. What I want to do is make a few responses very quickly to the range of very interesting remarks that were given today on the book. First of all, out of curiosity, how many of you have actually read the book? Oh, okay. That's two more people than I thought. You can see how strange the situation is. We're all talking about a book that very few people have actually read. So in a way, the book, which is about the foreign, remains totally foreign to everybody concerned. And so it's always my fear that every time I talk to particularly an audience that hasn't read my work, it's a repetition of that scene in Rizal, during the church where the friar is giving his sermon and everybody else is thinking about, what they're going to have for lunch and, where they're going to go tonight. And I mean, the last thing you're really focusing on is what the speaker is actually saying, because number one, you don't really understand it. Number two, you don't really care if you understand it. So there is a scene, there is a sense in which, as I said, it's always a very strange and I would say uncanny feeling, and I'll come back to that notion of uncanny later on, to be talking about something that very few people have read about. So there's always the danger that the conversation ends up being very limited to 5 people, and then everybody becomes a spectator. But, in any case, with those caveats in mind, let me respond to some of the responses. let me preface my responses by saying a little bit about how this book came about. The Promise of the Foreign is essentially a continuation of a set of obsessions that first emerged during the writing of my first book, Contracting for Rollandism. How many of you have read, or at least have heard of that book, that first book? Ah, good. Some more people. Yeah. Which was based on my graduate dissertation from Cornell, and that book begins in 1565, the beginning of Spanish colonialism, and ends around 1750. So I thought, ever since then I've been asking, what would a project that would cover the 19th century look like? You know, sort of continue these questions around translation and colonialism. And it took me a long time to formulate the project, and in the meantime, I wrote the essays that eventually came together in White Love, which is the second book. And it was only after EDSA 2, 2001, which is why the Arab thing is kind of interesting, that it's still happening today. It was only after EDSA 2 that the nature, the general outlines for this project started to emerge, because at that time, when EDSA 2 happened, I was very fascinated, when I was reading the accounts of the events, I was very fascinated by the prominent role people were giving to the cell phone, and people were giving to texting as a way of explaining how these people came together and eventually got rid of Arab. You know? And I was very impressed at the surge of interest and the obsession with texting. And I started to think about that for a second, and why is it that the technological innovation has the capacity to reshape the way people think about the relation to one another and the relationship to the country, right? What is the power of a certain kind of telecommunicative technology to do this? And it occurred to me that one of the things that the cell phone does is to provide a lingua franca called texting. Texting provides a new language with which to enable people to communicate across different lines that divide them, whether they're generational lines, whether they're social economic lines, whether they're linguistic lines. All of a sudden, texting provided them a common, accessible language. And it's not surprising that texting would become credited, rightly or wrongly, and there's a debate about whether or not texting actually played a role. What's more important is people thought they did. People felt that texting played an important role for momentarily bringing the nation together in order to effect what at that point was seen as possibly radical political change. Of course, it's only after the fact that we realized it wasn't so radical after all. Maybe it didn't even mark not much of a change. So, you know, with great expectations comes great disappointment and cynicism. The next step was for me to ask, where did this impulse come from? This impulse to invest a particular technology with the capacity to provide a common language to bring people together. Where did this come from, right?